unanimous consent.
Mr. Chair,
to,
sorry,
go
point of
back
order.
to-
Point of order.
Yes, there is.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Well, let's hear your point of order.
I'm offering a friendly amendment which can get us onto the pre-budget consultation motion
No,
within
that
minutes.
wasn't the member's question.
Well, if you're not even, if you're going to violate the process here, then no, you can't get unanimous
Mr.
consent to
Poilievre,
violate
I
the
am
process.
not violating the process,
are
but
indeed.
you are being disruptive. The sub-amendment to the amendment to the motion.
Mr. Chair?
But we would need unanimous consent to do that. Go ahead, Mr. Poilievre.
Yeah, I would make a motion in the spirit of what you've suggested, that we immediately vote on the motions with respect to the WE documents and the sub amendments to those motions, so that once we've completed those within the next 5 minutes, we can immediately move on to the next order of business, which is Ms. Zierowicz.
That wasn't the way I was putting it. I know
Well,
there will
that's
be
the way I'm putting
discussions
it.
on it.
Sorry,
well,
that's
you
my
just,
motion.
I'm asking.
That's my motion.
It's not a motion. You can't put a motion right now.
I
I'm
just
asking.
did.
No, you can't. It's not allowed. So
Well,
I'm
now
asking:
you're
is there
pre-budget consultations on top of it?
Is there unanimous consent to do what I suggested?
Well, you haven't moved it. There's no motion before.
No. I'm not. I'm saying, is there unanimous consent?
Well, for what though? You don't. Nobody's
to,
moved anything. You can't have a unanimous consent for a motion that doesn't exist.
Are you done, Pierre?
Well, it depends what you have to say.
If you are, we'll move on. Or do you want to keep talking? There, go ahead.
These people are crazy. This is going to be a disaster.
Happens in the House and what happens in the committee is basically two different areas. Okay, then I have on my list with the hands up, if we want to go with it this way, Mr. Poilievre, Mr. Julian, Mr. Fraser, Ms. Zierowicz, Mr. Fragiskatis. So we're okay there. Mr. Poilievre.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I have to say, this circus that the Prime Minister has created gives rise to great suspicion about what it is that he is hiding. First, we had the WE scandal, then the WE cover-up, then the WE prorogation, and then today, in order to try and cover it all up again, we had his threat of a WE-lection. The last thing we need right now is a WE-lection. We need focus on the pandemic. Canadians are suffering. Millions are unemployed. Our jobless rate is the highest in the G7. Our deficit the biggest in the G20. And instead of working on those problems, this committee
Point of order, Mr.
is
Chair.
playing games about to try and prevent the truth from coming out in the WE scandal.
Chair, point of order.
Point of order from Mr. Fragiskatis.
The member ought to know, as finance critic, the debt to GDP ratio is 48%, which comparably is extremely low. I just want the record to reflect the facts, Mr. Chair. As a committee, I think we are deserved that.
That's not a point of order. Back to you, Mr. Poilievre.
The deficit is the largest in the G20 this year. It is true that past governments have bequeathed good, solid financial health to this Prime Minister, but he is working with great haste to burn all of those riches and leave the present generation, forget future ones, empty-handed. But back to my original point. What the hell is this government hiding? If they're prepared to shut the Parliament down.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Poilievre, I'm going to your point of order, Mr. Fraser, but relevance to the sub-amendment, if I could hear Mr. Poilievre. What's your point of order, Mr. Fraser?
My point of order is on the use of unparliamentary language. I think the honourable member knows the language he's using to make his point. While it may increase the number of people who watch his YouTube video, is not appropriate when we're sitting in a parliamentary setting. Thank you.
Valid point. Go ahead, Mr. Poilievre.
Well, Mr. Speaker, no one wants to go there, but the reality is that the government is going to some incredible lengths to hide some ugly truths. If the Prime Minister was not afraid of what could come out in this scandal, he wouldn't have crippled 3 parliamentary committees with an endless stream of speeches about everything ranging from Greek philosophers to cartoon characters in order to burn up committee time and prevent us from getting to motions that would release unredacted documents to the public. He wouldn't have shut Parliament for 6 weeks, and nor would he have threatened an election today. You know, it's ironic that today in the House of Commons, in a related motion, Mr. Chair, the Prime Minister said he would call an election if a committee looked into the WE scandal. Now, he could not name a single solitary policy objective which the opposition is hindering. So clearly, this election threat has nothing to do with protecting Canadians in the pandemic, but everything to do with protecting him from accountability. So, I would ask members to quickly adopt the motion from my point of privilege so that we can get the unredacted documents.
Mr. Poilievre, I do hate to interrupt you, but we're not on your motion. We're on the sub-amendment to the amendment. I can't read it to the sub-amendment to the amendment to the motion.
Right, that's right.
And so we are,
Mr. Chair,
we are speaking on the sub-amendment now, so it'd be nice to have a little close relevance to that.
You can't comment on the sub-amendment to the sub-amendment to the amendment to the motion if you don't talk about the emotion.
Well, you weren't even on the motion.
You can't talk about a branch or a leaf if you don't talk about the tree.
The trouble is you weren't talking about the tree, Pierre.
Actually, I was right in the root of the tree. And I'm trying to get to the root of this scandal.
I tell you, the tree's a tall one. You're in the clouds.
Well, Mr. Speaker, it has some very deep roots that go deep into ground.
Go ahead.
I'm trying to expose those roots. What is it, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Chair, that the government is trying to hide in all this? Why would they go to such great lengths if there was nothing here? One can only imagine that the Prime Minister is waking up at 2 a.m. in cold sweats thinking about what might come out in this scandal, and that's why he has sent his MPs into this committee to filibuster for 20 hours when we should be talking about pre-budget consultations.
Point of order.
Who's the point? Mr. Fragiskatis.
Yes, in the interest of correcting the record, the member talked about the deficit. He forgot to mention that Canada has provided as much fiscal support for the economic recovery.
This is a point of order.
That's not a point of order, Mr. Fragiskatis. Mr. Poilievre.
No country has done more. I'm just quoting directly from where the member took
point
his
of order.
That's
point of order.
Not a point of order, Mr. Fragiskatis. Who else said a point of order? Mr. Julian?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would ask all members to respect members who are speaking. I don't think these interruptions are helpful or dignified at the Finance Committee.
All right, thank you, Mr.
Point of order, Mr. Speaker. I am here in the room where the interpreters are working. They're doing a great job, and when people are yelling like that, it's impossible for them to interpret. And so for people who only speak French, they can't follow along in these debates, and so I'd ask people to be more respectful. Thank you.
Mr. St. Marie, back to Mr. Poilievre, and a couple of points have been noted by Mr. Julian and Mr. St. Marie. Go ahead, Mr. Poilievre.
This is a scandal in which the Prime Minister's family accepted $500,000, and then the Prime Minister turned around and gave the group that provided those funds $500 million. That's a major Canadian scandal, and let me speak directly to him when I say Conservatives will not relent until the truth comes out in this scandal. He can threaten, he can bully, he can shut things down, but at the end of the day, we will continue to do our jobs until we expose the truth. So let's get busy and pass this motion so we can see the unredacted documents, the unvarnished truth, and let Canadians judge accordingly. Thank you.
Thank you. On to Mr. Julian. Peter Julian, the floor is yours. You just stepped away, I know, from the Mr. Poilievre has completed. You're next on the list, Mr.
Thank
Julian.
you.
Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, I'm not going to speak for long because I believe we need to go immediately to these votes with the sub-amendment, the amendment, and stop the filibuster. But I am profoundly disturbed by the Prime Minister basically doing away with pre-budget hearings. He threatened an election, and of course that would have meant no pre-budget hearings at all. So I think to reestablish our responsibility, we need to vote now on the sub-amendment, on the amendment, and on the motion of privilege, and move on from there. That's our responsibility as a finance committee, and then we can have discussion around committee business.
You're done, Peter?